Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now there are other ways of selling your old PC hardware instead of privately through online marketplaces or second-hand auction sites. For example, sites like CEX here in the UK will buy graphics cards, CPUs and desktops, etc. They might offer less than you could get elsewhere, but there are no fees or potentially awkward customers to deal with. That said, I recently sold a couple of old graphics cards to CEX and opted for the voucher instead of cash, which meant I got a little bit more, but I had to spend it with CEX or CEX. See, if I say that, that's just demonetization, I bet. You see? So, you see where I'm at. CEX, I think, is pronounced sex, but the more I say it, the more it's going to get flagged up, and they're going to be like, yeah, you can't. See? CEX, I've got to stick with it. Anyway, spending the voucher at CEX is fine by me. I mean, it's my second most visited website. With my £106 voucher at the ready, I decided to put it towards a used pre-built PC, in this case a custom grade B machine, sporting an FX CPU and GTX graphics card. This was up for an already low price of £135, but after using my voucher code I ended up paying just £29 for this whole computer. The only problem was that the finer specs were unknown until I opened the box, and then the case. Things like the power supply, motherboard, RAM configuration and the case were a bit of a mystery, but not for long. After opening the cardboard box like an absolute caveman who just discovered cardboard for the first time, I got a glimpse at the shiny reflective plastic side panel. There's not much packaging, but the box is like the perfect size for this thing, so it fits snug right in here, and I have no doubt this helped keep it safe during transit. A power cable and HDMI cable were also included, which is always nice. As usual, we get the dust included for free, which is fine, but the Cooler Master case is in pretty great condition underneath it, with a few marks here and there. After removing the aforementioned side panel, I was pleased to see that the cables were well managed, and the system had plenty of fans. The front of the case doesn't look like it allows much air to be drawn in though. Before going any further, I decided to test this thing out because if it was broken, I could rest easy knowing that I didn't break it. Part of me wished it was, because this thing lit my room up like a public bathroom in a dodgy part of town. The PC worked fine out of the box, and the included Windows 10 operating system had been reset. I decided to switch off and go in for a closer look. More specifically, I wanted to know what little black box was powering this thing before pushing it too hard. Removing the other side panel didn't unravel any more of the mystery, but I did get a chance to check out the cable management around here, and again, it didn't look too bad at all. That was until I found the fan adapters, and then the fan adapters for the fan adapter adapters. While round here, I also got a proper look at the hard drive, a Toshiba 1TB P300, which you can still buy new for about £35. No surprise SSD this time around, but that could be the sort of upgrade that would breathe new life into a machine like this, especially if you were to add another stick of DDR3 RAM as well. 8 is fine, even in single stick form, but for gaming and editing purposes, 16 gigs of dual channel would help out. Back to the power supply, and we have an AeroCool Integrator 400W non-modular unit. I've seen loads of these online, and they're still sold new. I don't know much about the reliability, but user reviews are generally good, and considering that the graphics card in this machine doesn't even need external power, I'm sure it's fine. Finalising with the CPU and GPU then, and we have an FX 8300 to start, not an 8320 or 8350, just an 8300. These are still okay. I mean, it has similar performance to a Phenom X6 1090Ti with modern instruction set support, and it falls just short of an Ivy Bridge i5. In pairing with this, we have a GTX 1050. Once a solid budget card, this is now let down a little bit by its 2 gigs of VRAM in modern games, though it is still fine for older titles and it supports the latest drivers. It's difficult to recommend FX chips in 2022, and the 1050, like I say, is best suited to older and less demanding games, but that doesn't mean we still can't have fun. I said before that a 16 gig RAM upgrade would be ideal for this thing, so I'll show you some footage from the out-of-the-box single 8GB config, and then switch to 16 gig gameplay as well. Time to see what this thing can do, and whether or not the power supply can allow it to do said things. First up, we'll go easy on the PC with CSGO. This runs fine at 1080p on this system, even with the 8 gigs of RAM installed. As you can imagine, there are some little dips here and there. I always test a bot match, as I can replicate the same scenario again in comparative tests, and while it's more demanding on the CPU than an online game, it gives us a sort of worst case scenario. 8 gig single channel is fine, but adding another stick of RAM improves not only the average figures, but the 1 and 0.1% lows too. This improvement to the percentile lows is arguably more important than the increase to the average. The same can be said for Cyberpunk really. 8 gigs is fine, I mean the CPU and GPU are problematic in their own right, but the lesser amount of RAM brings with it lower percentile figures, which will mean more stutter and noticeable issues in busier areas like downtown Night City. If we switch to 16 gigs of RAM, then it's clear things are smoother overall, but even this time the game isn't without issues. The processor struggles a bit, and the game is unplayable without using FSR at higher native resolutions. That said, it doesn't look too bad, even in combination with the low settings. Elden Ring is sort of beyond help with the FX 8300. I don't think this game likes older CPU architectures because no matter the resolution I chose, it still ran with less than 30 FPS overall. Because of that, I stuck with 1080p anyway. NVIDIA image scaling might help a bit in terms of easing the load on the GPU, but ultimately it's the CPU that this game doesn't seem to like. I know because I revisited the 1050 a couple of months ago and got much better results with a newer processor. As I said before, this is the case with added system memory as well. 16 gigs can't help out our system today, but it's worth noting that the 1050 can still play it, so don't let this result put you off if you own or want to buy one of these graphics cards. Fortnite ran pretty much identical with both 8 and 16 gigs of RAM installed. Here we have the 8 gig gameplay first. Things are fine for the most part, though there was some stutter when the game first started. The inconsistencies lasted a couple of minutes and then things smoothed out. This is DX11 mode, I should add, as DX12 caused a lot more little freezes and drops with this hardware. Switching to the dual channel doubled amount of RAM, and once again we saw just over 75 FPS. There were a few frames in it all in all, but when actually playing, these differences couldn't really be felt and weren't noticeable without measuring performance with MSI Afterburner. Forza couldn't quite hit 60 with just a single stick of RAM in the PC, although the result was okay and different races and events had a different impact on frame rate, which most of the time was solid enough to enjoy the gameplay experience with the low preset. Adding another 8 gigs rounded our frame rate up to 60, and this of course made it far more enjoyable in those multi-competitor races where we may have seen a slightly more significant drop in performance beforehand. Finally, it's Red Dead, and again the extra RAM made a difference, one that was more prominent in busier settlements and towns. 8 was fine, but noticeably less smooth overall. Switching to 16 gigs of RAM meant that we could venture into Valentine or Saint Denis without worrying as much about the game stuttering during a pivotal moment. If you buy used pre-built, then the first two things I check would be the storage and RAM configuration, because a lot of the time replacing the HDD with an SSD and adding more RAM will be an excellent starting point for breathing new life into an aging computer. I should clarify before I go that this video was not sponsored by CEX, although it could be. Anyone from CEX watching? Thanks as always to all of you for unboxing this PC with me today. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, leave a dislike if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.